Hola amigos de CineNT, estamos aquí en la presentación de Eisenstein en Guanajuato, en la Ciudad de México. Estamos con el señor Peter Greenaway, con el señor Elmer Bach. Welcome to Mexico. We'd like to start this little talk asking you, Mr. Greenaway, can you introduce to us Mr. Elmer Bach? How do you say he is Eisenstein? How do
All right. Can I introduce you to an extraordinary actor who just happens to come from Helsinki and Finland, a very cold country in Northern Europe, and say that he is making in the film Eisenstein in Guanajuato a most excellent Sergei Eisenstein, Mr. Elmer Bach.
Thank you.
So how do you feel when you know you're going to work with Mr. Greenaway?
The first time, well, it was great. I actually remember. I think we never talked about that, but I remember the first time I came to Copenhagen and I came down the stairs and you were sitting there. It was kind of a cellar, no? It was down, yes. And I remember because the first moment it was so strange because I had seen you before, like on TV and like that. And the moment I came down, it took like a minute to actually understand that you were sitting there. And it was funny because you asked me something. And I was totally not like responding first, and I thought now you're thinking that I don't speak very well English because I was like not reacting. So the first moment was very interesting like that. But of course, well, it was great. I mean, of course, it was a long journey before I knew that I got the part. I mean, we had like I think 2 castings, and then of course there was the sense of there's always the budget issues. Are we gonna make it? When is it gonna happen? So it's difficult because there's not the moment when it's like now we're making it, because it's always like we probably we're gonna make it now in 2 months, but probably of course it was a great thing, and I'm very happy that we are continuing this. Yes, working together.
Did you know Mexico before? Was the first time when you go to Guanajuato?
It was my first time in Mexico. Yes.
You speak Spanish.
Sí, hablo un poquito, pero entiendo más, sí. Estudio español en este momento, sí.
¿Y por qué la curiosidad de aprender el español?
Porque español es una idioma muy bonita. Yo creo, y que, no sé, es como, yo he estudiado español en mi escuela hace, no sé, 10 años, y después tenía una... sí, quiero quiero hablar más de español. Es un poquito difícil en este momento porque es como sí, pero sí. Pero no sé, también pero también la cultura mexicana es muy interesante para mí, todo es el país y todo es como muchas cosas. Pero sí, no sé, es un idioma muy interesante. Do I have to do that now?
He's almost as talented as Eisenstein.
Oh, yes.
All right. Mr. Greenaway, in Morelia, you show us different pictures at hand by Eisenstein. In which time of your life do you start to recollect, to investigate, to have all these things about this great director?
Well, I think you'd have to go back to when I was in art school in London in the late 1950s, because I'm 73 and very old. And I came across Eisenstein probably by seeing his first film, which was called Strike, which Eisenstein made when he was age 26, very young. And then I think, 2 years later, so 1928, I think, or maybe even 27, he made Battleship Potemkin, which I think all the world knows. I saw these films almost entirely by accident. I had no idea who Eisenstein was. In fact, when I asked people about Eisenstein, they said to me, surely you mean Einstein, haven't you got it wrong? Because, the actual knowledge, again, about 1957, 1958, about Eisenstein in England was very, very small. But I think since that time, and I was completely bowled over by these 2 extraordinary films, they were the first films which I could really say were really serious cinema. I was used to English and American cinema, which of course I saw in London, where I lived at that time. But, if you make a comparison, if Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse are made in Hollywood by Walt Disney. And you know, when Mickey Mouse gets hit over the head with a brick, the next frame he's up and running around again. If Donald Duck or Mickey Mouse were Russian, they would never get up. There's always a way the sense of responsibility would really be very much paramount. And this, I think, both astonished me and also excited me, because I suddenly realized for the first time that cinema really could be a serious art form. And I think that's probably the very, very beginning of why I am now a filmmaker. When I was trying very hard then to become a painter, I think basically on some melancholy moments I've entirely wasted my career, because I really want and still do to be a painter. An Italian journalist asked me some months ago, they said, "Mr. Greenaway, why is it you began your career as a painter and now you're a filmmaker?" And I said, probably with a certain amount of truth, but also maybe a little glib and facetious, that I was always unhappy that paintings did not have soundtracks.
Yeah, I remember in your master class in Royal, you are talking about the music, the importance that's having the movies. And I remember the beginning of Eisenstein in Guanajuato, that you are making a very interesting point of view of how to make a beginning. The music too loud, we had images hitting the face of the spectator. In which moment Peter Greenaway wanted to stop to hitting us in the face as spectators?
Well, I've got to attract your attention, haven't I? You know, the first 5 minutes of any film are very, very difficult. You try to immerse an audience inside your dream, and you've got to grab them very quickly and very purposefully and in depth, otherwise you're going to lose them for the rest of the film. So those first 5 minutes is very, very important. And music can often incredibly help you in that. The music for this film, as you probably know, is by Prokofiev, and Prokofiev and Eisenstein were collaborators for a large part of their career. I suppose the most famous collaboration would be Alexander Nevsky, where they worked very, very hard on trying to make a very equal balance between the notion of filmmaker and musical composer, because often that balance is very unequal in the cinema. You know, we're much more concerned, I think, with making the picture first and then worrying about the soundtrack afterwards. And that's not really an ideal way in which to make a collaboration. So we've used, I think, two symphonies by Prokofiev. Symphony number 1, which is sometimes called classical symphony, which is in fact Prokofiev's attempt to remake Haydn, to go back into musical Baroque history and artificially create a very balanced Apollonian notion of the Baroque symphony, which I think is very successful. And then I think for the sequence in the House of the Dead here, or rather not here because we're now in Mexico City, but there in Guanajuato, we used, I think it was the first part of the second movement of his Symphony number 5. There are also quotations from Romeo and Juliet and also Love of Three Oranges. So I got to know Prokofiev music. Well, I used to like it very much in when I was an art student, but reacquainted myself with it. And I hope you appreciate and are delighted by the relationship between the notion of the image and the Prokofiev music, which is sometimes extremely beautiful.
Okay. Elmer, you have a very interesting scene with Chris Alberti. You know, in Mexico, many times talks about a nation of machos, nations of men. But we also have in Mexico a lot of traditions about homosexuality in movies. What do you feel when you make these scenes? Do you feel comfortable? Do you feel confidence with Alberti?
Well, yes, I felt very confident. I'm comfortable with Luis Alberti, and I think that was something that we really needed to find. And also with Peter, we discussed this a lot because, of course, to make that scene, I mean, you cannot. I think Peter also told me in the beginning. If you are uncomfortable, you can see it. I mean, the camera will see it, so you need to be comfortable. And of course, in that kind of scene, it's difficult to be comfortable, and the best way to do it is to talk about it. So we went through it, and then we spoke a lot with Luis beforehand and that. So, but in the end, I was thinking about that a lot, of course, and he was also, and we were discussing it. But then in the end, when we did it, in a way, we had discussed and thought about it so much. So in the end, it wasn't so difficult when we actually did it. But it was an interesting scene, and of course I was very happy to see it afterwards, because then I understood exactly why it had to be like it is, and where in the movie, and the sense. And I also liked it because I was surprised when we saw it the first time together. I mean, in at the Berlinale, also how like light in a way it is, because I thought it would be kind of a hard scene or provocative of that, but I didn't feel that at all. I felt it was light and comical, and also joyous in a sense. So it was nice. Yeah, in a way. I'm happy with the scene. Yeah.
For many people, your Einstein is like the Amadeus from Tom Hewlett's
Yes, I keep hearing this. Yeah.
interpretation. Do you realize that when you make the character?
I realized it after. No, I did absolutely not think about that when we were making the movie. I mean, afterwards, I heard that. I think I heard the first time at Berlinale, and they keep telling me. Of course, I understand this kind of because he's like a child, like in a way a genius, or like a highly intellectual, a highly artistic person who is also very extrovert and childlike. So of course I understand, and we even have the hair kind of doing a little bit of this. No. Has he? Yeah, maybe. But I never thought about that. I can understand it now, but I absolutely did not think about it when we were shooting. It's something that I heard afterwards. Yeah.
And this is my last question, Mr. Greenaway. Can we expect in the future another movie about architecture?
Can I ask you why you asked that question?
Because I love the last movie you made about architecture, and I know that the formation you have, the architecture is very important, and for us as a spectator, as fans of your work,
Right.
I have the
No, I remember, I don't know whether many years ago in Rome, we made a movie called The Belly of an Architect. So I certainly am fascinated by architecture. You know, architecture self-evidently is a mother of all the other arts, because all the other arts take place in that sense of architecture. And I think what I got very excited always about the architecture of Rome, which is so incredibly rich, I was actually asked afterwards to participate in all sorts of architectural exhibitions and to award prizes and so on. I remember in Riga, I think I was asked to judge an architectural competition for the design of a post office. But it's completely bogus. I was trained as a painter, not as an architect. But I like the idea of classical architecture because a lot of my creation of imagery is very much related to the frame, the necessary space which we're allowed to work in. And I always try very hard to make what's inside the frame, architecturally, work with that notion of the frame. I want to make you very aware that we look at cinema through a frame. There's no such thing as a frame in nature, so it's a very, very artificial phenomenon. And I think I've always pursued that. But you can see what happens in this film. Most classical architecture is based on the grid, verticals versus horizontals, and we certainly do that with that splendid bathroom and the splendid notion of a screen broken up into three, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Ghost, because a lot of this architecture has religious significance. But there's a way also that we would use the digital revolution to break that through. The contemporary famous architects are people like Libeskind and Gehry. So we break the organic whole. We completely make the architecture, in a sense, live and very much associated indeed with organic life and break away from the notion of the frame. So it's good to be able to entertain you with our examples, indeed, of the architecture of architecture, indeed, the architecture of cinema.